Good day. My name is Tony Hatcher, and I'm currently enrolled at Cape Breton University in Sydney, Nova Scotia in the MBA program. And I'm also currently enrolled in MBA624 International Business. My professor is Dr. Jacqueline Scott. A prerequisite of that course is to do a project on a country of our choosing, and looking at it from an international standpoint or an international trade standpoint, doing business with that country. I've chosen Cuba because I've visited Cuba in the past, and I thought it would be an interesting topic to take on. When I first discussed the project, I first talk about international business in general. And what I mean by that is, once you decide to look outside your comfort zone, your country, your city, or whatever, you go into the global market, it changes the game completely. You have to consider things that you normally would not have had to consider. What's the political landscape of the country, of your target country? What's the demographics like? Is there a good labor pool there? What's the current economy like? Is there a monetary value strong? Is their currency strong? Many things. Their culture. The last thing you want to do is to insult, a prospective target by not understanding their social norms. So there's much to consider before you even partake into looking into investing in a foreign country. The next thing I do is I talk about the history of Cuba, and it's a very storied history. It's about 400 years of Spanish rule, give or take about a year of British rule in between there, coupled with the revolutionaries, Fidel Castro taking it over in the 1960s, and more history that's actually more relevant to today. Cuban Missile Crisis, Bay of Pigs, and the trade embargo which exists today still is a major thorn on the side of the island country. I then go on to look at different aspects of the country. There's many, and the report goes on and on. I could take days talking about it. Some of the ones that I found particularly interesting was their monetary system. It's what they call a dual monetary system, which essentially means that they accept two types of currency as legal tender. One being the Cuban peso and the other being the convertible peso, which most of us who have traveled as tourists to Cuba understand all too well. The Cuban peso at one time had been pegged to the Russian ruble, and unfortunately the collapse of the Soviet Union caused their Cuban peso to go into the toilet, essentially, which prompted the Cuban government to legalize the American dollar, which later on they got rid of and replaced it with the the convertible Cuban peso. The real trouble now today in Cuba is that many of their state workers actually work for Cuban pesos, which are much lower valued than the convertible peso, and unfortunately for the state workers, many of the important like toothpaste, like toilet paper, they're actually sold by stores in Cuban convertibles, which means they can't afford them. I remember my first time going to Cuba being stunned that they actually didn't look forward to being tipped monetarily with dollars. They liked little trinkets like toothpaste or toothbrushes or hair combs and things like that, things that they couldn't afford because of the way the way their monetary system was. The other thing that amazed me, quite honestly, was the success of the Cuban government, or the Castro government, in improving on the education system that's there. It's really like for a third world country, it's amazing. Their literacy rate is 99.8%. And their educational stats are up there with Canada and the U.S. and many other developed countries. It's quite amazing. After that, I essentially go over a lot of the statistics like the HDI, which actually the Human Development Index, which they've actually been taken off because apparently the people who developed the index say that there's not enough information about their income to make an assessment. A lot of things are gone over. I go over a lot of things during the project, and then I come to basically a conclusion, and it's probably not a popular conclusion, but my conclusion is the people, from the perspective of the report, the people that I'm looking at to invest in Cuba are kind of risk averse, and I see Cuba at this point in time as still very risky. Its infrastructure is falling down. We have buildings that are falling down. The rail system is dilapidated. Half the roads are still not paved, and that's the way it was before Fidel got there. And the water distribution system is a shambles. And even worse than that is that most of the equipment that runs that is American equipment, which the Cubans can't get a hold of now because of the embargo. It's literally falling around their feet. And if that's not enough to scare you away from investing in Cuba, what was once, not too long ago, a couple of years ago, seemed to be a cooling between, or a warming up between the U.S. and Cuba, seems to have gone back a little more. Vice President Biden has said unequivocally that the trade embargo is not going to be lifted, although there have been signs that it may be. When you look at one of the even bigger problems I see is that we're talking about the Castro boys who aren't going to be around forever. In fact, their days are very much numbered. Fidel is very ill, and most people don't realize Raul has just turned 80 a couple of days ago, so he's not getting any younger either. And it's not like the Castros have ever really primed a successor for them, so who knows who's going to come in behind them. Will that cause strife? Will that cause social upheaval? For that matter, I mean, the Cuban government's the economy is so bad that they've been forced to plan on laying off 500,000 state employees and hoping that they can take licenses and try to build their own companies. Well, what if that doesn't work out? Will that cause any social upheaval? And as I said, worse than that, what happens when the Castro boys are out? Who comes in? And more importantly, can we be assured that any agreement that the Castro brothers make with us as investors will be honored by the next people who come in? We really don't know. There's a lot of risk. I'm certainly not denying that there's a lot of reward if you get in quick and it's a success, but there's a lot of risk there. And for me, it's too much risk at this point in time. Had the Freedom to Travel to Cuba Act been passed, maybe I might have a different outlook. It didn't, and I see some real problems ahead for the Cuban government. And to me, as I said, I think it's a bigger risk than I would want to make. Although, looking at the internet and trying to find people who agree with my sentiments is a little hard. Most don't, which goes to prove only there's only one plausible explanation for that, and that there's an awful lot of wrong people out there. Thank you.